Hello, everybody. It is another Friday here at Experience Investigators. I'm Jeannie Walters, and this is an Ask Me Anything webinar. We are always so happy you're here. Make sure that as you join us, you let us know where you're joining us from. We love finding out where you are in the world and how we are connected. So let us know. Today, we're going to be talking about 3 questions you should be asking if you are focused on customer experience management. We'll talk a little bit about what that means by definition, but really any customer experience leader should be thinking about these questions. And I'll be honest, it's kind of shocking how many don't. So I hope you'll chime in and let us know what questions you want to be asking or that you feel you need to be asking, or maybe that you're asking that we should be asking. So it's all about questions today. Make sure as you have them, you drop them into chat because as always, we have with us today our Director of Marketing, David Hornreich with us. David, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited about today. So many of these are about answers. Today we're talking about questions. It feels
That's
like
right.
Jeopardy.
There we go. Maybe we should make that rule where
Yeah.
you have to ask it in the form of a question or you have to answer.
People have to ask questions in the form of an answer.
There we go. Let's make it as confusing as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
So you're joining us from Seattle as
Yes,
always,
I
right?
am. Yes, I
And
am. And, true to its reputation, it is rainy and gray today. So it is officially fall.
well, it's we've had some beautiful weather here in Chicago, so I hope it keeps up because the humidity has gone down. There's been a nice breeze. It's just been beautiful. So I'm hanging on to this while I can and remind me of this in like January, February.
I was going to say, as a former Chicago resident, I love the 2 weeks of fall before then winter. Just you wake up one morning and it's
That's
winter
right.
and
That's
wind
right.
that blows through all of the layers of your clothing.
I know. Joanne's here from Chicago. Hi,
Hey,
Joanne. I
Joanne.
hope you're enjoying this weather. And we know we're going to have people who are, experiencing all sorts of things because we always have a great crowd here. So thank you for joining us. And I think we should probably just jump in.
Let's do it.
All right. Excellent. Well, we are talking today about questions. And the reason we're talking about these questions is because as CX leaders, a lot of times what happens is we are just tasked with things. We're told, just go do this, just go create a strategy, just go do a journey map, just go, become customer centric. And I encourage you to ask these questions with your fellow leaders because, as we've said before, customer experience is absolutely a team sport. We need other people in order to succeed. So, first of all, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeannie Walters. I am CEO of and founder of Experience Investigators. At Experience Investigators, we help customer experience leaders really understand how to deliver meaningful customer experiences that drive the business forward. We do this through workshops, through keynotes, through some coaching and consulting, all sorts of ways that we work with you. But we really love supporting leaders like you. Many leaders don't have CX in their title. That's totally okay. We know that you're out there making change within your organization. You can find us on all the platforms. We have tons of resources available for you at yearofcx.com. We started Year of CX last CX Day, so October 2020. We are coming up to CX Day 2021. That means we're almost wrapping up our Year of CX, where we deliver tons of tools and resources that you can use, things like success statement guides and workbooks. So if you haven't signed up for Year of CX, I really encourage you to do that so that you can get those available resources while they're available for you at yearofcx.com. And if you're using those resources, let us know. Use the hashtag YearOfCX and let us know on social how you're using these tools to move your organization forward. We love hearing about your results and your success. So feel free to drop that in the chat as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So when we talk about customer experience management, what do we really mean there? Well, the reason I bring this up and the reason I think it's important to pause a little bit and define this is because sometimes we talk about customer experience as if it's this abstract thing, as if it's something that we are really just supposed to know about, just supposed to act on. And that can happen even with leaders in large organizations. That can happen when our executives come to us and say, how are we doing with customer experience? And all of that is really important. But when we talk about customer experience management, that's how we're really acting on it within our organization. That's how we show up as leaders to make change for our customers. So instead of treating customer experience like it's this nice to have or this soft thing, customer experience management is about what we do inside the organization in order to deliver on that customer experience. So it's the turning that idea of customer experience into what it should be, which is a mindset, a strategy, and a discipline within your organization so that you can really drive results. Because none of this matters if we don't get those results for our organizations. We have to continually look at how are we delivering on behalf of not just our customers, which is absolutely important, but also how are we delivering results for our organizations as well. So there are 3 questions I encourage you to ask if you're not already asking these. I also encourage you to ask this of other leaders. Getting other people involved is super important. So the first is your customer experience intentional? We'll talk about why that's so important. How do you define customer experience success? If you have been on these before, you've heard me ask this question 8 different ways. It's that important. And we'll talk about a good way to actually define success. Do you have a cross functional customer experience team? Now, many organizations don't necessarily have this. But what we want you to think about is how can you build those coalitions to make sure you can deliver on the strategy that you've defined, on the business discipline and the best practices that you're introducing in your organization. Because when we are managing the customer experience inside the organization, then we are really telling other people as well. We are broadcasting that it's important. It's something that isn't just something we talk about, but something we do. It takes effort and action to deliver on customer experience. So the first question seems so obvious, right? Is your customer experience intentional? And I ask this question because when we talk about customer experience, we have to realize that it's happening whether we are managing it or not, whether or not we have a customer experience management practice, whether we have leaders with CX in their title, whether we've uttered the words customer experience or not within our organization. Your customers are still experiencing your brand. Every single touch point they have, every single interaction, every time that they have an expectation that is either not lived up to or exceeded, that develops their perception of your brand. Every time they have an emotional response to anything with your brand, that is customer experience. So we have to stop acting like it's something that we either are doing or not. The difference in the brands that lead here are the people, the leaders who think about it intentionally, who design it intentionally, who think about how can we deliver the best, most proactive and positive customer experience we can for our customers. There is a sense of intentionality and, frankly, mindfulness about this, that if it's not there, it's very hard to get the results that you're looking for. And so we have to start talking about it within our organizations as the thing that it is. We have to get everybody on board to understand that we need goals around this. We need a strategy. We need to understand how to measure success. And we need to constantly check in with our customers and ask ourselves, are these journeys, is our customer experience living up to what we intended it to be? Because if we don't define that up front, then how can we talk about it in an intentional way? So one of the things that we have available to you, this is all part of Year of CX, but you can also get this separately if you'd like. We have a customer experience charter guidebook. That's because when we talk about customer experience strategy and we talk about being intentional, there are certain tools we need to put together to make sure that we are telling the right story, that we are committing to the right things. a charter can really, really help you do that. And it can help you guide your team in a very intentional way. So I encourage you, if you haven't checked that out, we also have videos available for you on our YouTube channel that actually walk through these resources as well. So, the second question, how do you define customer experience success? I know some of you are like, we heard you on this. We know that this is important, but it's that important to think about. When we define success for customer experience, we have to get specific. Sometimes I see folks who say, oh, we've defined it. We are going to build an exceptional customer experience that is best in class. What does that mean? We have to get very specific about what that means. If we are saying that we are going to deliver an effortless experience for our customers, what does that mean? How can we get into defining things so that we really understand what are the specific outcomes that we're looking for? How can we measure that success? And how can we make sure that every single employee in our organization really understands what success looks like? Because if we are telling people or coaching people or reprimanding people even in our organization, and we're saying, you're not living up, you're not delivering the best customer experience you can. And they say, okay, well, what does that mean? We have to all be on the same page and say, what we want is we want less effort for our customers. This is how we're measuring it. This is where we are with it. This is how you can contribute to it. It gives us a common language about what success actually is. It's so important. And I can't tell you how many organizations skip this step. They talk about customer experience in general terms. They don't define it. They don't understand how to measure their progress. And so after a few years, they might be measuring things. They might be having, reports that come out that talk about net promoter score or customer satisfaction rates, but they haven't yet connected those dots to what that means for the overall organization and for their leaders. So that's the level of detail and specificity I want to encourage you to look at. And we have another resource for you about building your customer experience success statement. This is a full workbook. You can literally go step by step and define how this relates to your organizational outcomes, your leadership goals, how you'll measure it. And really, in a year, in 2 years, in 10 years, this will give you a place to say, okay, how are we doing? What do we need to adjust? How will we know if we're successful to our vision for this in 10 years? It really will help you think through the process and get other leaders on board so that they understand that this isn't just a nice to have. This walks you through thinking about, what does your chief financial officer think about? Well, maybe she thinks about cutting expenses. So when you define success, can you make that part of the definition of success so that you get other leaders to understand this is a benefit to everybody throughout the organization, as well as to your customers, as well as to the success of the organization itself? Do you have a cross-functional customer experience team? This is the one I usually get that look, right? People look at me and say, we want to. We have some people we've asked to be champions or advocates, but we haven't really formalized it, or we know everybody's involved and we just kind of ask for people when we need them. But if you are the lone CX person out there, or if you have a small team and you are not only responsible for collecting that feedback and setting these goals, but then executing on them, the way that we execute is through other people in our organization. We need our leaders to say, you know what, we're going to do this on behalf of the customers because we've heard the feedback, we understand what success looks like, and we want to be a part of it. And so that's why having a cross-functional leadership team is so incredibly important here. And that's why we need to identify and, again, get specific and get detailed about who's on this team, what roles are we playing, what are the responsibilities that everybody has, how often will we meet, what does a meeting agenda look like? All of the things that we apply to other areas of business, we have to apply that same lens to this team as well. And if you can get folks involved and committed, you'll start seeing real progress and real change as you move forward. So, this also helps you socialize what's happening with your customers, with your customer experience program, with really those baby steps that it takes to get to those milestones. Socializing through a cross-functional team and letting them bring that out into the organization, you'll start getting more and more leadership buy-in. And that's a huge part of customer experience success. No matter where you are, no matter what type of organization, you need your leaders involved. So, guess what? We have another resource for you. How fun is this? It's a CX meeting agenda and guidebook. It's really there to help you think through, what does that meeting look like? What is the cadence that we need? What are the ways that we can bring the voice of the customer, truly the voice of the customer, into that room and make sure that everybody who is part of that cross functional team stays very connected, not just to the numbers and the dashboards and the results, but also stays very emotionally connected to the customer at the core of everything that we're doing. So, this gives you some ideas for how to structure that meeting, how to share the responsibility of leading that meeting, how to get other people involved and engaged and accountable. So, I encourage you to check that out as well. So, these are the 3 questions to think about as you move forward in your organization. Is your customer experience intentional? Is it really intentional? How do you define customer experience success? Make sure it's specific enough so that you can measure it, so you can talk about it in a way that is a common language throughout your organization. And do you have that cross functional customer experience team? We need other leaders to get things done. We need to make sure that we have that buy in throughout our organization. And then, the final thing to think about here is that this does not happen by accident. It never has. Great customer experience happens by design. And yet, when we talk about examples, sometimes we forget that. We say things like, well, just be like Disney, right? That's all. Be like Disney. Disney is known because they've been very intentional. They have that cross-functional support. Everybody understands how important the customer experience is, and it's all by design. They know exactly what success looks like because they've designed it. They've been intentional. So make sure that as you are thinking about this, you're also equating the idea that if we talk about it as a priority, then we have to make sure we're truly investing in it. We're putting in the effort and the resources needed to get the results we want if we are talking about it as a priority. So these are big questions to think about. But if you can think about these and apply that effort and discipline so that you can, get the right outcomes, then everything else becomes easier. It really is about getting that foundation right so that you can build on it throughout your customer experience and your customer's journey. So at this point, I would love to hear your questions. I would love to understand, what are some of the ways that you are dealing with some of these things and really understanding how to better design and be intentional about your customer experience management practices. So, what are we hearing so far, David?
Well, let's start with a comment that
Sure.
I think leads nicely into a sort of implied question. This comment is from Bob. He says, I see how the tendency is to go general instead of getting specific about what success is and all of
Hmm.
that, because it's easier. And what a
Yeah.
great reason to do it. Like, especially when we're so busy with other priorities that are
Hmm.
demanding our attention. This is one of those things that if we put it on the back burner, usually we aren't going to have people barking at us that, we're not doing what we need to. So
Hmm.
I
It's
guess
true.
my follow-up question would be, are there ways that we can encourage people
Hmm.
beyond just saying, hey, let's go through this success statement workbook?
Hmm.
Are there ways to help people prioritize this?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's the great struggle, I think, of a lot of customer experience leaders, because if we don't get specific, then it's very easy to shrug off customer experience, and that sounds awful, but that's the truth. So what I always try to do is flip the lens to something that people are a little more familiar with. So in business, we would never say to a sales team, "You're gonna be the greatest sales team and you're going to make sales easy." and leave it at that. That would never be a sales goal, right? And so when we talk about sales goals, we always get specific. We say things like, we need this percentage of growth. We need this percentage of revenue. We are looking to increase the, maybe after sale feedback. We're looking to reduce the time from prospect to customer. There are all sorts of ways we really define what that looks like so that everybody on the sales team really understands what the goals are. That's the level we have to start getting to with customer experience. We have to stop acting like saying we're going to have a great customer experience is an actual goal. We have to get more specific about that. So if you can flip the lens a little bit and say, how would we say this for a sales team? How would we have goals for our, product team? How would we have goals for our operational efficiency? Those are real goals. Those are things that we get really specific about. And the other part of that is they're typically related very directly to our overall organizational goals. And so it's really easy to say, okay, our organizational goal this year is to increase growth by X amount. And so that trickles down to a sales goal that is directly connected to that. And it might be broken up differently between outside sales and inside sales and new customers and all of those things. So we might slice and dice it differently, but all of those teams understand that they have a goal that is directly related to that bigger goal. And that's the part that we have to get to with customer experience, because otherwise, how do we know if we're successful? How do we know if we're really managing this in the right way, if we're investing in the right places, if we have enough resources? What I see a lot is that the resources are applied to collecting customer feedback. We spend a lot of time, effort, energy, money on figuring out how do we get the best feedback from our customers. That's great. That's a really important step, but that's not the end goal. Collecting feedback is not the goal. Sometimes that's a step towards our goals. Sometimes we have to take the time to say, you know what, for the next 6 months, our goal is setting up that program. That could be a worthy goal, but it's always about that next step. What is the outcome we're really looking for our organization? So I would think about this in terms of what are the other ways that goals are defined within your organization, and start looking at that language and applying that to your customer experience goals as well.
I like that. We don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Mm.
We've got a follow-up question from Bob asking if you have any examples of success statements. Jeannie, if you want to throw that out, I'll let you, but I also am dropping in the chat right now.
Perfect.
There it goes. A link to an article that Jeannie wrote earlier, all about customer experience success statements. There's also an earlier video that we recorded on the topic that dives a lot deeper on CX success statements than we've been able to in this video. So those are great resources. And then, of course, I'll throw this up as well. The CX success statement workbook goes into a much more detail that really breaks down every component of the CX success statement and how to develop those components with your team and then put them all together to create your own. Other than that, Jeannie, do you want to add anything
that was
and add any
fantastic.
examples?
We have a lot of resources on this. This is something we're passionate about. So
yeah.
Here's what I typically see and how I coach different leaders on this, because a lot of times they build it out and then they either have too many goals or they are still in that kind of vague world. So the best statements say things like, and I'm going to riff a little bit here and probably not get it perfect, but the best statements say things like, at Acme organization, our goals, our overall goals include, let's say, increasing our return customer rate. Maybe that's part of it. And we are looking to do this in a way that encourages word of mouth referrals. And, you can go through a couple different ways of saying that. And we know our leaders are very passionate about becoming the go-to choice in the marketplace. And that sometimes is a little vague, because what we're trying to do there is reflect back to our leaders. we're saying, we heard you. Sometimes CEOs will talk a lot about, we want to be customer centric. We want to be customer centric, but they haven't actually applied any like real discipline to it. So what we can do with this statement is reflect back those words and say, we're going to do this in a way that focuses on the customer, because we know that's important to our leaders. And then you break that down and you say, we are going to look to increase referrals through a better customer experience. We are going to work on improving these metrics. So maybe you're already focused on something like Net Promoter Score. You can start equating that and saying, we know that if we increase Net Promoter Score, our referrals go up. And so you start connecting those dots in the statement. And so you wrap it up in a way that is saying, this is how we define success. This is what we're measuring and why we're measuring it, because the NPS might be the leading indicator and the referrals might be the lagging indicator. But by connecting those dots in the success statement, you can then start saying, you know what, our NPS is going up. That means that we are more likely to get referrals. That means we are basically getting that return on the investment for the overall organization, because that's part of our organizational goals. By becoming more customer centric, by measuring that, we're going to get these outcomes, and that's going to support the business. So I encourage you to, when you use the workbook, when you put this together, I encourage you to think about, are we specific enough? Is this tied to our organizational goals enough? Are we excuse me, are we reflecting our leadership language? And is it short enough? Because sometimes we love to add, 17 goals, and it's really easy to get ambitious here. I would say edit as much as you can.
But we want to do everything.
I know we do. We do. You and I are guilty of that too.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, keep the questions coming. Thank you, Bob, for a great question. And I want to jump to a question that came in from the community before today's session. How does all of this fit into the employee experience? Should we be having a separate employee experience team and EX management meetings, or is that a part of the CX team and those meetings? How does that all fit together?
Yeah, part of me wants to say, yeah, yes, that's the answer. Because in an ideal world, your employee experience should reflect all of the same things that your customer experience does. So if you are making promises to your customers about having an effortless experience, but your employees are being forced to fill out a bunch of paperwork again and again, they have to go through obstacles in their workflow every day, they are not really respectful of each other in a way that they would be for customers, all of that matters. And so what I always encourage is that you give human resources, employee learning and development, give them a seat at this CX team table, because they are incredibly important to making sure that you can deliver on customer experience. So that's where I would start, is inviting them into this process. But then I would also, sometimes I've seen where learning and development or HR specifically, they might have an employee experience team that's pretty robust, which is great. But then you can even ask, say, hey, could we have a seat at that table? Because then you're hearing things in a way that can reflect back and forth. So if they have a great idea for employee experience that you think, wow, wouldn't that be cool if we could bring that through to our customer experience, or vice versa, you want to keep those lines of communication open. So sometimes there isn't a robust employee experience team. That's okay. I would still encourage the right people to be part of that CX team. The other group internally that can be very helpful is your internal communications team. They can really help you socialize the right things, get the word out, keep that voice of the customer in front of every single employee. They can be very helpful there too. So I would say anytime we can, we need to really partner with our human resources, employee experience, culture, diversity, equity, inclusion team, all of those people. We want to get those leaders at the table, because that has such an impact on the customer experience that we can actually deliver. So that's how I would approach it.
Love that. I think that's going to do it for the questions this week. Jeannie, any final thoughts?
Well, as always, it's just such a joy to be here with you live to get these questions. We know that you are fighting the good fight every day. We know that these are big questions to ask, but I encourage you to ask them and to keep asking. And if we do this right, what that means is that we evolve as leaders and that our programs for customer experience evolve and change based not on just what's happening in the world, which is certainly a part of things today, but also about how much buy-in we're getting, how much cross-functional support, all of those things. So thank you so much for being here because as you know, the mission of my company is to create fewer ruined days for customers. And by being here with us today, by learning with us, you are helping us live that mission. Now, you can find us online in all sorts of different ways. We encourage you to reach out. We want to hear from you. Don't forget to tell us, how are you using these Year of CX resources that are available? Use that Year of CX hashtag. And if you haven't already, sign up for those resources at yearofcx.com. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for every day that you're putting the customer first and that you're defining success at your organization, because that's really what it takes to move forward and to make sure we're delivering exceptional customer experiences that deliver not just for our customers, but for our organizations as well. I'm Jeannie Walters. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you again next time.